Morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's an honor for me to welcome you in Florence, and I feel the responsibility of doing so. This is a very important event. We've been working for this event for a long time, and I'll be presenting this international conference on the flood and drought risks. The panel is, as you can see, a very stimulating one. I will leave the floor in a few minutes to the Mayor of Florence, Sara Funaro, the highest authority, and then to all the other institutional representatives. As the General Manager of the Basin Authority, the Northern Basin Authority, so the Basin Authority for this area of Tuscany, I have the responsibility of thanking you. This must be a memorial day, but also an informative opportunity, because we are commemorating the flood of Florence, and we must use this opportunity to reflect on the future, to show that we have learned the lessons of the flood. Florence and Tuscany are really familiar with the notion of memory. Memory is not only the idea of remembrance. Memory is also linked to engagement and community knowledge and awareness. And our territory needs constant attention, competence, collaboration, cooperation. Recent events are a reminder of the vulnerability of our territory. Our territory is highly exposed to many kinds of events, not only extreme events like the 1966 flood, but also other kinds of events that are really frequent right now, so that we shouldn't even consider them extraordinary. We are the land of art, the land of nature, and our art and nature must be protected as if they were art masterpieces. And I'm thinking, for example, a wonderful exhibition in Palazzo Strozzi right now of the painter Beato Angelico. And that's the same approach we should have. Look for the masterpiece and protect them. And attention, care, accountability, these are the main elements we should take with us. Everyone should play their own role. Florence is a city of art, culture, memory, and of a bright past, but it's also a place where you can experiment. So this is the moment in which a path starts, and the authorities and representatives will explain that in the panel, because, as you know, next year the Euro-Mediterranean Forum will be held in Rome, and Italy will participate as well as other countries of the Mediterranean. And our conference is right now being streamed in 42 countries in the Balkans, in Northern African countries, and we also have representatives from the Amazon forests. And we can see that many people are right now watching our conference and are interested in what we are going to say. So here in the house of culture, of memory, of art, we should start working to face our future with responsibility so that the vulnerability of our territory can be dealt with, because those vulnerabilities are right now being actually combined with other kinds of vulnerabilities. So safety must be our must. Thank you again. I'll give the floor to Biagio Di Terlizzi, who's the general manager of CHAM in Bari, a very important organism that collaborates with One Water in this conference. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. General Manager. The presence of an international organism like the Center for Agroeconomic Study in the Mediterranean area, the CHAM in Apulia, is due to our hard work of climate hotspots around the Mediterranean. I'd like to thank the mayor, the authorities, and the One Water Committee that wanted to create a partnership with the institution and the institute. We are collaborating right now also on the basis of the guidelines of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs that financed initiatives so that the One World Committee could work internationally as an Italian organism. The moderator mentioned the idea of memory. Of course, memory of the 1966 flood, but also responsibility and accountability. And I think memory should be accompanied by resilience. And resilience is fundamental to work in those countries where water resources are a real issue. And those communities should be helped also from an economic point of view. If we think about the Middle East, for example, we should always remember the importance of human dignity. There are cases in which 1 cubic meter of water costs 12 euro. Here, it costs 10 to 30 cents. So why am I speaking of dignity, of decency? Because that cubic meter of water that costs 12 euro is used for farming, of course, but also for people, for civil purposes. And so agriculture, basically, and farming have scarce resources, and people, families, risk to be deprived of water resources. So with the committee, we are working and we're bearing in mind the issues of those countries where water resources are a real issue to be managed. In Bari, we want to work on training so that with research and cooperation we can work with politicians and communities. We need community needs to be carefully planned because governance issues in those countries can actually be fragmented. So there is a real problem of fragmentation of governance, which is an issue in Italy too. That's the role of the Institute, and we also want to enhance international reflections and collaborations. We collaborate with the Union for the Mediterranean, and of course we're always willing to collaborate with Italy in an international scenario, not only a Mediterranean scenario. Thank you, Mr. General Manager. I would like now to give the floor to the Mayor of Florence, Sara Funaro. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and welcome everyone here in Palazzo Vecchio. It's a real pleasure for me to welcome everyone here, both the people who are here in Palazzo Vecchio and also those who are following us online for this international conference held in Florence dedicated to a very important theme, so the reduction of water-related risks. It's a kind of reflection that we've been holding for a long time. I also would like to address my salutation to Minister Pichetto Fratin, who cannot be here, and I think he recorded a video message. I also would like to thank all the speakers who will be enriching our program today. I would like to thank Gaia Kekuchi and all the organizers for choosing Florence. Florence has, of course, an important history if we think about the subject of today's conference. This is a very particular day for Florence. This day marked the history of Florence. There are several moments in the history of Florence who should be commemorated. Florence was the very first city to abolish the death penalty, for example, all over the world, or the moment when Florence was liberated by fascism. But the memory of our city is also marked by the events of the 4th November 1966, a day when Florence was injured, where the appearance of Florence has changed forever. 35 lives were lost for this tragedy, and that's an incredible wound for Florence. But Florence, as it always does among crises, demonstrated that its citizens, the city, and the whole world that helped people in Florence had an extraordinary strength and an extraordinary dignity. We were discussing that with Erasmo a few minutes ago. Mud angels, as they are called all over the world, were those who, with city authorities, actually saved our city. But before international aids arrived, the very first who started working for Florence were Florentines, were inhabitants of Florence who lived in the areas who weren't subject to the flood. They welcomed other fellow citizens in their houses. They helped in the areas where the flood was more serious, most serious. I think that that international moment of aid was actually something that made people in Florence really proud. And it's also one of the reasons why this date, this event was so important to Florence. And this event also showed us how important prevention and territory knowledge are. In the last decades, the authorities of Florence, Florentine institutions, have worked for the safety of the Arno River and its basin. Institutions, technicians, consortia, and local communities worked together in order to achieve this goal. And this goal was really important. Just think of the expansion areas in Figline with Pizzicone, Restone Prunli, and Lecce that may contain up to 25 million cubic meters of water, which represent one of the largest water prevention infrastructures in Tuscany. But think also about the embankment. We worked on the embankment so that it can protect the center of Florence. But I'm also thinking about the River Mensola, a very good example of integration between safety and good urban planning. Think of the Mugnone or Terzolle and their maintenance, the Sieve Basin, and all the work we've done on all the rivers around the city. That made Florence and its metropolitan area more resilient, and that's also a very good reminder of the fact that this is a never-ending challenge, and this must be our absolute priority. We are aware, thanks to what happened in our territories, that climate change and the unpredictability of extreme events actually provide us with new responsibilities. First of all, we have to protect our water resources, but we also have to protect an extraordinary, fragile, and wonderful territory that is frequently subject to sudden water bombs, to extreme meteorological events in which rain is really a problem, alternating that with drought issues. This is not a challenge that a city can deal with all by itself. Of course, we must work on climate change. In general, we must work on water risk prevention, but we especially need cooperation at national level, but even at an international level with other countries. We need technological innovations, and we need a shared and sustainable management of water resources. We are right now trying to invest on water. Water is the most precious among all the resources. This is why this kind of initiatives are really important for us, because they represent a concrete step towards the first Euro-Mediterranean Forum of Water, which will be held in Rome in 2026. And this is also an opportunity to enhance collaboration between institutions, research institutes, civil society in the Mediterranean basin. Florence, the city of water and memory, is proud to host this initiative. And we think that only by creating alliances in the territories And by investing on knowledge, can our communities be safer so that vulnerability is transformed into resilience, and memory is not only a remembrance act, but it's an accountability issue towards our community. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for your hard work and for the contribution each and every one of you gives to the construction of a more aware future. Only by combining our knowledge, our responsibilities, our competence, can these challenges become a concrete issue, so that solidarity is not the only ingredient of our action, and so that through concrete resources and measures, Florence will become the hub of innovation. Thank you, everyone.
Grazie. Grazie.
Thank you very much to Mayor Mrs. Sara Funaro for her welcoming, but also for her speech, for her contribution, in which she mentioned two key words, knowledge and prevention. And I hope we will talk about it technically as well. Now we have a video message by the Ministry. The Minister Gilberto Pichetto Frattini, he's the Minister of the Environment, and unfortunately he couldn't be here with us, but he sent us this message.
Buongiorno.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure for me to give my own contribution to this very important initiative. I greet the Mayor, Mrs. Funaro, Mr. Gianni, the President, and also to Mr. Ciciliano, the Head of Department. Today, it's an important day, and the place where you are very meaningful, and it is something that is very touching. We all picture in our eyes the images related to the flood that hit Florence and Italy at that time. Young people reacted, the so-called mud angels. That is a very enlightened example. So we have the responsibility to avoid for these events to happen again. Managers are responsible for that. And that task cannot be avoided because our country is very beautiful, but it's also very fragile. Therefore, we have to take care of it. We have to listen to territory. We, at the Ministry of Environment, we have a technical initiative with all the Italian regions. We want to start a pathway. We want to start the exchange of data concerning hydrogeological situation. We want to streamline and simplify procedures in order to act quickly and in a more efficient and effective way. We, the government, the ministry, we are at the first front in order to help any territory. So it's a national priority for us. Therefore, we have to go behind sectorial limits or short-term initiatives. We want to finance quickly, and we want to put in place interventions in a systematic way without any delays. For 2025, we have 350 million allocated by the ministry to the regions. These funds go together with the funds provided by the president of the region, and I want to thank him. These interventions are very important So now the challenge is related to planning. And we have to be present, we have to be quick in investing, because it is a matter of safety, but also it is our country's future which is at stake. Working together, we will do something for our communities, remembering the lessons we learned from our past. Thank you. Thank you very much to you all. So we thank the Minister Pichetto Fratin. Now I give the floor to Mrs. Maria Spena, who is the President of the Italian Committee One Water, and she can explain this initiative, not today's initiative, but the One Water initiative as a whole. Thank you. Good morning to you all. First of all, we have to take into account today's initiative. November the 4th for Florence is not an ordinary day. 59 years have passed by from that day, and these years must... Goodbye, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your hospitality. So this 59-year period should reinforce our civic knowledge concerning environment, resilience, and water resilience. I want to emphasize a key idea. We are in this iconic place for civic architecture. We are in a place that is very well known in Europe and also all over the world. So here in Florence, many young people came here from all over Europe on a voluntary basis to help in rescuing works of art and books from the floods. They were the so-called mud angels. And since then, we found mud angels anytime we needed help and solidarity. It is a kind of alliance among generations through Europe. At that time, many people, many young people came here from all over Europe. Well, we as Euro-Mediterranean Forum 2026, we want to start from this idea, from the idea of cooperation, hope, and we want to emphasize and follow a pathway to raise awareness towards environment and water resilience. 43 countries will participate to our forum on water, which is the first one on Euro-Mediterranean level. Till now, fora have been organized at Mediterranean level. Now we will involve Balkans as well, and that will be the chance to allow many stakeholders to meet: universities, experts, scholars, technicians, politicians, because we want to start an exchange of know-how, of experiences. Italy has a say because hydraulic science started here with Leonardo da Vinci. So the hydraulic engineering is something that Italy can convey during the 3 to 4 days, during which Rome will be the capital of water. Rome will be the center to gather this event, all these people. That will be a key step within blue diplomacy, because since we want to involve Africa as well, as a continent, we have to talk about blue diplomacy, so never wars in those areas where water is still something that you fight for. But we also have to mention blue finance. Today we are here to talk about risk mitigation, risk reduction, and blue finance can support through bonds, through financial tools in order to reduce risks. In addition to that, blue economy. Today, blue economy represents 10% of GDP in Italy. So it is an economic sector that represents a driving force for Italian economy. I want to thank the committee for its outstanding work with Mr. Gargano, with Erasmo De Angelis, and so on and so forth. They are here, and I welcome them. I also want to thank Mr. Ravo, the representative of the Foreign Affairs. Everything started there at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when we met, when we decided to start this initiative, because we think that blue economy, blue finance could speak Italian. Italy can be a leader in the Mediterranean area, and this area can be a hub in terms of water resilience, in terms of environment as a whole. So there is still a lot to be done. So until October 2026, we have to work very hard. We already organized several meetings at a regional level, but we want to focus on Africa now. So we are going to talk about all the investments provided by Mattei Plan that supports the water sector, water infrastructures, but we will also deal with the investments. And there are many, many investments equal to 8 to 9 billion euros provided by the Italian government in terms of resilience, in terms of hydraulic infrastructures. Recently, the Italian government allocated 1 billion for the 2025-2029 plan in order to fight against water shortage, but also in order to support an agriculture that should be more innovative, more resilient, since it is a very important sector for our economy. So that will be a chance for us to gather all the organized initiatives, all the results, but also that will be a chance for us to think about what we have to do again, but also a time to exchange for Italian citizens. I would like people, citizens, to participate, because by now, in my view, citizens are ready and aware for all these themes. In the past, we thought that closing the taps was enough, as we had to switch off the lights. Now we know that there is a new way for us to reduce the consumption of water. Water is the natural element which is essential for our lives. Water is birth, is life, and therefore we have to respect water. That is why it is important for this event to involve as much as possible the civil society. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Spena. I would like to emphasize the fact that these initiatives are not just for experts only, but when we know criticalities and problems, we should convey a simple message. Simplicity often implies evaluation, in-depth studies, difficult evaluations, and so on and so forth. But whenever we talk about water, we should simplify as much as possible. Yes, I do agree now the awareness, knowledge have changed compared to the past. Now people are much more aware, new generations in particular. Therefore, we have to seize these opportunities, starting from knowledge, awareness, and responsibility. These are key words for us. So I thank Mrs. Spena since she mentioned these important ideas. And now I give the floor to Mr. Mastroianni, the Vice General Secretary of the Union for the Mediterranean, that is included in the One Water Committee. Thank you very much for your invitation. I am Italian, but here I represent an international intergovernmental entity gathering 43 countries in Europe and in the southern part of the Mediterranean. With water, we have an extraordinary cooperation, and we are happy that our next conference will be organized in Rome, and we thank the organizers for that. We gathered European states and the states located on the southern shore of the Mediterranean, and we are the only institutions that covers this area. UN does not include Mediterranean. There are 3 different administration entities, 3 different negotiation groups. The only container, the only action unit covering this area is our union. That's why we joined One Water. That's why I would like to give you very quickly the regional perspective. I will not analyze the water-related problems as a whole, but I just want to mention 4 points that usually are neglected by the science sector and by the political sector. These 4 points play a key role for Italy at regional level. I would talk about a geographical responsibility for Italy. No other country could do what Italy can do. So the first point, which is often neglected, is that there is a problem directly connected to water, but water implies several problems related to environment and to climate change. Water is important for the fight against fires, for infrastructures. So we need an integration in a policy for water without focusing on water only. Secondly, science and water policies focus on a lack of growth. But the problem is not this shortage. The problem is randomization. In other terms, we do not know when it rains and for how long. Our area is a little bit peculiar. Our area played a very dynamic role in the global history. It is the birthplace of several civilizations, simply because in this area we had the most important revolution in history, that is to say, the rural revolution. That was the time when mankind started to manage the ecosystem. That happened in a systematic way here, because here you had the best conditions to do so, because we had this huge mass of water stabilizing the climate. Climate cycles were stabilized, and it was possible to carry out some forecasts. Therefore, in this area, it was possible to manage the territory. Mediterranean is the second area for the climate heating, and the Mediterranean Sea heats up very quickly. Therefore, our sea is a driving force for chaos. In other words, that is something that jeopardizes our identity. So the situation is very serious. If you look at our area, in our regions that are responsible for food security are on the Mediterranean shore. But on one hand, we have the mountain system that is collapsing, and on the other hand, we have this sea that eats up more quickly than the others, and that implies salt for water tables, for soils. So the problem is not the shortage of water, but it is the impossibility to make forecasts. Therefore, our target shouldn't be to be able to fight against dryness, but we have to think about mechanisms in order to face this lack of predictability. Third point, we humans, we are self-referential. It doesn't snow, so we are worried about the impact on skiing resorts without thinking about the woods around the skiing resorts that allows the resorts to exist. So the absorption of unforeseeable peaks should be reduced by enhancing the natural heritage of the region. Fourth point, the impacts of all the phenomena, rain and so on and so forth, the impacts hit several areas. And the idea is that each area has to solve its own phenomenon. Arno River flows through Florence. But nevertheless, there could be a link between this river and the Nile River. So we should avoid this misleading attitude. I see that there is a representative of civil protection. It's unthinkable to reduce risks on a national level only, because climate changes will affect several productive areas, and that will affect any market. So we have to avoid chaos. We have to plan the actions. That plays a key role in Italy. In such a scenario, it is very important to combine our strengths, and therefore Italy plays a key role considering its geographical position, because we are affected by several climatic changes, and we have to think about specific mechanisms on that, but we can also accept solutions by others. There is an additional aspect, and I say so not because I'm an Italian. Whenever we talk about water, about energy, about wastes, we do not talk about markets only. We also deal with independence, sovereignty, freedom. Well, Italy has a trust. I mean, people trust Italy, and this is not something that is very common. And this trust opens the doors in very peculiar sectors. Italy has this position, outstanding position, thanks to which can offer initiatives, cooperations, and this is an opportunity, but it is also a great responsibility. We are the key player in the northern area, which is not the area with the highest numbers of solutions, but we are the key player, and we are considered as the country able to provide solutions to be shared. That is why One Water, that was launched in Italy, but it wanted to involve anyone. That is why One Water is very important, and we are very happy to be member of these initiatives. Thank you very much.
Grazie a lei.
Thank you, Secretary Mastroianni. I think your contribution was really precious because when we go beyond the national level, of course, we are then really affectionate to the idea of the national issues, of course. And it's very important to export something interesting, also based on the perception we have of other countries and from other countries. So these are very good reasons to be hopeful for the future. And we will be contributing as much as possible with other players to the organization of the event in Rome. Marco Rago, the next speaker, is the legal counselor for the minister, the Italian minister for foreign affairs in terms of international cooperation. And he is one of the pillars of One Water, I can say so. Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the mayor of Florence. I know she's no longer here, but I would like to thank her, first of all, for hosting this event in a unique venue in the world. Speaking in front of those masterpieces is really impressive. And also I'd like to thank her for having shared with us a very important piece of history of Florence, of what happened 59 years ago. The resilience shown by Florentines and by the Italian people in general, was really remarkable because everyone reacted very rapidly and especially with such generosity. I also would like to thank Maria Spena, the chairperson of the One Water Committee. We've been working together for 1 year now. And I would like to thank all the international guests. One Water, as a program, was conceived 1 year ago at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. One day we decided that Italy could take some commitments and could play the role of the leader of this committee. And we also decided to collaborate with other international organisms like SIEM in Bari, that is an agroeconomic a center for agroeconomic studies. We have also worked with a council specialized in water studies in Arabic countries. Then we worked with the Mediterranean Union. The Mediterranean Union wanted us to be the hosting countries for the conference that will be held in March. We also work with the Institute for the Italian Latin American Cooperation. The cooperation with Latin America is a confirmation of the importance of this subject, also far away from here. I also would like to thank other important players of our project, for example, the Vice Chairman of Civil Protection, and I also would like to pay you the respect of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Antonio Tajani, who is really interested in what we are telling today and who wanted this day to be organized. I will try to now very briefly tell you what we are doing. I want to give you an international perspective. 1 year ago, we started promoting Italy as the venue for the international conference. Then all the countries of the European Union were involved. The European Institute in Marseille, established that Italy was the perfect place to carry out an important project with Italy as a leader for the whole Mediterranean area, from Morocco to Jordan. There are many countries, different situations and realities, but we weren't scared. We were very determined to do that. And so with regional players, we've been working to understand what the expectations are towards the Euro-Mediterranean Forum. Because as many people thought and stated, Italy is the leader in this sector, in this field. Italy is the leader about water-related issues in the Mediterranean, which means that the role of Italy is more and more important. It is not easy to actually combine all the needs, the different needs that we may have in Italy and in other Mediterranean countries. Our aim is not to provide countries with solutions to solve water-related issues, but what we want to show other countries is how resilient Italy is. Thanks to basin authorities, we have many skills and much knowledge to be shared with Mediterranean countries in order to create a peaceful atmosphere in which different peoples are brought together. That's our attempt, and so far we've had encouraging results. Probably among the people who are following us today from abroad, from 42 countries all around the world, probably there are people who are very interested in these issues. The Mediterranean Forum will be held from the 29th of September to the October the 2nd in 2026. Between 2,000 and 4,000 people will visit the forum during the whole week. So this is a very important project. We'll collaborate with 43 international delegations in order to discuss the most important issues. Of course, that may sound scary, but Italy actually decided to work on those issues, and especially the Minister for Foreign Affairs. We've heard the Minister for the Environment, and he is very enthusiastic, a video message. And of course, also the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, the Ministry for Infrastructures, the Ministry for Sea, and I hope I'm mentioning everyone, besides, of course, the Ministry for Farming. So 5 ministries have been working in order to organize this event so that it can be successful. Over this year, we started to actually set the governance for this forum. Italy is not a leading country in order to impose its ideas. Italy only wants to provide this forum with constructive remarks. Other countries called us, other countries asked us for our opinion, and I can tell you that's a first time for us at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Turkey invited us in April. Morocco invited us too. And I mean, the goal is not to travel around. Our goal is to actually help with our leadership role. But what happened in March? In March, there was an important meeting in Malta. The Union for the Mediterranean summoned the 50 countries in Malta to decide where to hold the second meeting of all the ministries of the large Mediterranean area, and there was only one application by Morocco. I was there, and I can tell you that for a series of reasons and for political and technical reasons, there was no consensus about Morocco. That's why Italy decided to apply for being the hosting country. And the result was that each and every country voted in favor of Italy. I had Israeli and Palestinian representatives around me, and they both voted for Italy, for example. This was really an important moment because it means that maybe we can even try to slowly work on conflict between countries. So in March, we are going to host 50 ministers in Rome in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And we will be working with all the governments and all the ministries in Rome, and especially in Palazzo Madama, the venue of the Senate, of the Italian Senate. So we're showing them the best we have, and that will show that Italian leadership goes beyond the borders, the banks of the Mediterranean. We've been asked to be the chair the UN conference in Dubai, the International Conference on Water. And there are 5 theme tables. There will be countries from around the world. And as usual, we'll be perfectly integrated. We don't want to be the protagonists. We just want to share our knowledge and skills and to actually collaborate with all those countries which admire us. Probably countries from abroad look at us with a kinder regard than we do in Italy. And this means that we can share our knowledge and enhance Italian leadership about those issues in Italian and in the Mediterranean. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Rago. Hopefully, we'll be able to play this important role. We, of course, will try. As I told you, today's event is an opportunity to reflect. I think the president of Tuscany is on his way. Maybe we can wait for him for some minutes. Otherwise, I'll give the floor to Mr. Mazzei, and the president of Tuscany region will then be taking the floor. Thank you for being here. Good morning. I am here on behalf of Fabio Ciciliano, the Chief of Department of the Civil Protection. I don't have a presentation, of course, because I knew that I had to speak only a few minutes ago. I would like to thank the organizers who invited us to such an interesting initiative. We hope to be invited also for the following events. As everyone said so far, this is a Euro-Mediterranean initiative, which means that different countries are involved, countries where drought may be a problem, or countries where floods are more frequent. And our country, Italy, is really at the core, at the center of the Mediterranean. And Italy is also subject to other types and kinds of events. And I'd like to remind you that in 2023, when there were floods in Tuscany, we still had in place a system of laws for drought, conceived for the drought. And Italy was divided into 2 very different areas because to the south, the main issue was drought, and to the north, the main issue were floods. So a completely different situation. Water is, of course, necessary, but water can be positive and can be destructive. We are here to commemorate the flood of 59 years ago in Florence along the river Arno. But I also would like to remind you that in 1966 there were very dramatic and serious events where water was as high as 94 centimeters. Those were destructive events. There were about 130 casualties. There were billions of lira of damages. There were many displaced people. And this was actually a turning point for the system of civil protection, but also in the approach of risks, of water-related risks, and to the prevention of those risks. For the civil protection, as someone has already said, the episode of Mud Angels was such an important one because we coordinated the effort, the international effort, and we also started working on prevention measures because at that time it was impossible, for example, to warn people. We didn't have a comprehensive evaluation system, which we do have in place right now. And the experience, especially in terms of spontaneous volunteering, was very important for the current perspective of civil protection. As Chairman Zamberletti wished, we are basically a voluntary-based association, as we started being when the flood happened. And preventive and prevention projects are organized thanks to what we learned in 1966. The Commission de Marchi was a very important step towards this change in civil protection. The higher experts in water-related risks worked together for a very important achievement. I will not dwell on that because many people are actually more competent than me here. But it was a very important step in risk management and structural management at the basin level. So a very comprehensive approach to the problematics of territories at the basin level. And this is also the core of current regulations, starting from the flood law, the Flood Act. This is the meaning of the event we are commemorating today. But what happened after 1966? Well, something that is really important happened, because this is actually the very basis of our reflections. Extreme events are more and more frequent. Since 2018, the state of emergency was declared more than 120 times for extreme water-related events. And it means that several billion euros were spent for this reason. And these extraordinary events, and maybe I shouldn't even call them extraordinary, are different kinds of storms. And the storm in 2018 and landslides in the south of Italy in 1 week, with an impressive raising of sea level also along the Tuscan coast. and Italy spent 3.5 billion euro only for those events. In 2019, there were extreme events in the Tri-Veneto area, and rainwater fall was similar to rainwater fall in 1966. And then we have the most recent one in the center of Italy, and especially in Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna. May 2023, Emilia-Romagna, November 2023 in Tuscany, and between 2024 and 2025 there were 3 more extreme events in Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna, basically in the very same places where it happened. So what can we do about that? Because there's an important element we should take into account, that before I mentioned the number of extreme events, and as I said, in the last 8 years, emergency events were 120, and there were also 12 official statements of drought issues. And several billion euro were necessary to react to those emergencies. Only in Tuscany, 800 million euro were spent for civil protection interventions. And after the approval of Law Number 1 in 2018, the civil protection can be involved also in risk prevention interventions. But the scope is quite limited. So not in terms of structural prevention, for example. What's the consequence of that? The consequence is that in situations like the ones I mentioned, in which the same events happens in the very same area, even though the civil protection intervenes very efficiently, because I must say that civil protection in Tuscany is really, really efficient, but the frequency of intervention in vulnerable areas and in areas where it was not possible to completely solve the territory and make it safe, make those events even more likely. And it also means that from an economic point of view, the interventions are less cost effective. Just to close my remarks, there are extraordinary events that are more frequent than in the past. Of course, our territory is not as safe as it used to be. Our territory changed, and the level of unpredictability for our territory changed. So, besides reflecting on how important structural prevention is, and about that, of course, some steps forward were made, so that I can say that events like 1966 flood are not possible right now, thanks to the possibility, first of all, of informing people. And we are working on a system of public alert in case of storms, for example. And there are several initiatives of awareness raising activities to make people more aware of risks. For example, I'm thinking of an initiative called Meno Rischio in Toscana, Less Risk in Tuscany, that started in 2023 and involved several players. That increase knowledge and skills. Of course, our territories must become safer. We must work on the safety of our territories and work on the combination of civil protection actions and of ordinary urban planning activities. And of course, we must ask ourselves if it is necessary to work to enhance prevention capacities, because we should start thinking of how local authorities can be involved in urban planning to link their actions to the safety interventions after extreme events. So we have to schedule and prioritize interventions, safety interventions after extreme events. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Natale Mazzei.
Capo Dipartimento della Protezione Civile e dico subito a
Vice Head of Department of Civil Protection. I would like to tell Antonio Mazzei that the gap between emergency and structural interventions could actually be the prevention of flood risks. And as everyone knows, that's the gap we're working with. So those situations that are, yes, urgent, but not as urgent as others, but it's what we're focusing on while mapping our territories. So it's a challenge we want to seize from here, from Tuscany. And of course, we'll collaborate with the Department of Civil Protection. Thank you once again, and I would like now to give the floor to Eugenio Gianni. I'm really happy he is with us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gaia Kekuchi. Gaia Kekuchi is a leader for the Basin Authority, and I know that when she's in charge, competence and a professional approach are in charge. We are here in a room that explains very well what it means for our territory to speak about water. Look at the board here to my left, the 16 territories of the Grand Duchy of Tuscany. 16 geographic boards, and in the extreme you can see that in the Casentino area the river is marked as the center of this territory. As Dante said, Dante spoke of the Arno River and spoke of these 242 kilometers in the very heart of Tuscany. Florence was the only point where you could cross the Arno River. Caesar decided to found the new city here exactly for that reason, because he could cross the river. And we are speaking about that today, 4th of November. We are commemorating what happened 59 years ago. Of course, as many people mentioned, prevention must become the most important part of our action, because, of course, awareness is really important when we organize and plan this kind of memorial events. I want to thank Erasmo, who's been working for years to organize the commemoration of the 4th of November. And at a national and local level, prevention actions have been scheduled, but as we know, even if we've done many things, there are still many things to be done. As we saw on 14th and 15th March, we risked, there was a concrete flood risk, but in the 14th and 15th March, we saved Pisa, because over the Ponte di Mezzo, there are 2,000 cubic meters per second, and it became 80 centimeters. The dam effect may have actually caused a flood in Pisa, but thanks to the work we carried out in Calambrone and the specific basin that we created to avoid floods, we could actually save Pisa. So the flood control basin actually worked and helped us save Pisa. Of course, it's really impressive when we actually do that, because it's, of course, an impressive amount of water. And the city of the Leaning Tower that you can see here was saved not from war, but actually from floods. But think of Bilancino as a prevention instrument. Bilancino can hold up to 67 million cubic meters of water, and it's also very important to contrast drought moments in the summer, because of course we all know that there's no water in summer because this is as you know, the upper Valdarno has more water than the lower part, and so we go from the 4,000 cubic meters per second that we had in 1966 to the 1 cubic meter we have during summer. And in those moments, the fact of gradually releasing water through Bilancino ensures safety in Anconella and Mantignano. so that for the three provinces, Florence, Prato, Pistoia, and Arezzo, we can contain the risks, as Mr. Perini knows. And Florence has always been actually a cutting-edge city, because it was the very first city to create, for example, water factories, because in Carrara they needed water, so they created sort of a factory to pump water to Carrara. There are many infrastructures that have been built. For example, we have created a new tank in Pizziconi that contains up to 3,500 cubic meters. And the other one has been used in San Miniato with 5 million cubic meters water that can be contained. We also have other projects that are currently being elaborated, and we are working on dams and on other infrastructures. And I think that many things were done along the Arno River, but we have to remember also about minor rivers, other smaller rivers. Think of what happened 2 years ago between Florence and Pistoia. €2 billion damages. 8 people in Tuscany died. It was a terrible flood, and what we saw is that very, very small rivers overflowed, like the Stella or the Arnia. And just 1 week before, I inaugurated a bridge on the river Furba in Poggio a Caiano, and it was actually always very dry. There was drought in the river Furba. The river Furba was always dry, but then it overflowed during that period. How can we deny climate change? Water bombs are caused by climate change. That's why it's necessary to work on smaller, on minor rivers. Because due to water bombs and to very heavy rainfalls, they can create really extreme events. Things of buried rivers in the 60s or 70s. Near the stadium of Florence, there was a river in ancient times, and we don't see it because it was covered. It was covered by cement, by the street, by gardens. But there is a river underneath, and it's really impressive to think about that. Think of high-speed trains that make us reflect and reminds us that before, the Mugnone River was actually had a different course. If you look at the course of the river, this becomes really evident. Those interventions were necessary, and they had a preventive role against the floods. And this is, I think, that the defense, the protection of lands is the most important part of what we have to do. During my electoral campaign, I received, of course, surveys about the importance of each issue for people. 5 years ago, when one would ask which is the most important public intervention that can be done, 5 years ago, the protection of our territory was ranked fifth. It's now the very first priority to everyone, because all citizens are now aware of the importance of prevention. I have been working for a long time also as a commissioner before being the president of the regional council, and so I've seen this issue from a different perspective. I'm thinking about the civil protection. I appreciated the vice head's intervention. I think the civil protection should really be appreciated for their excellent work. But from a regulatory point of view, it's really hard to intervene, even for commissioners. On the contrary, we should be able to act very fastly. So prevention is very important, but the speed of execution is as important as prevention. So we should also work on that, even if resources are affected. I would like to now finish my intervention. But before, I want to thank you, because November the 4th is always an important event. Next year, it will be 60 years, the commemoration of the 60th years, and I will find the resources to fund a very important event. I hope we'll be able to actually create a digital record of what happened. I always hear people talking about the mud angels, and I'd like to bring some of them here for the 60th year, because many of them were enthusiastic to help Florence. I remember Ted Kennedy's intervention when we commemorated the 40th anniversary of the flood. Ted Kennedy came here from the U.S. after listening to some of the artists who invited people to come here and intervene, for example, Mr. Zeffirelli. And I think next year we'll have to organize an event like that, because it would be a way to explain how important mud angels were, because many volunteers work together with passion, with a heartfelt passion, because here in Florence we did experience floods, almost always in November. November the 4th was the date of the flood in 1966, but also in the 14th century there were floods. In 1333 there were floods that destroyed Ponte Vecchio here in Florence. It was rebuilt 15 years later, and it was also in November that there were floods 2 years ago. So I'm really happy to see that these awareness-raising initiatives are organized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President Gianni. Having the floor after him, it's very demanding because he goes through the past, present, and future. And 20 years ago, I was there for the 40th anniversary. So the fact that we are still here after so many years, that shows that we really care, that this topic is very important indeed to us. So the first session ends here. So now I give the floor to the other chairman, Massimo Gargano, together with Maisonnier, who is not here. So I give the floor to Mr. Gargano with a great pleasure. And now we are opening up a more technical session with some practical examples. Thank you very much. Well, I invite Mrs. Gaia Kekuchi to join me here at the podium. I also invite Mr. Yeya, I have never met before. Please, Mr. Yeya, join us here at the podium. And then I invite Mr. Gordillo, please. You can join me here at the podium, all of you, the people I mentioned. So there should be a session showing some practical experiences. I am the moderator. I have to open this session, and I would like to add another key words. We mentioned our pride, our system as a country. I would like to mention the responsibility, the accountability of our country to other countries that are working very hard. I know very well the history of water management in Egypt. You thought about it, you planned it, you managed it in a very outstanding way. So today we have the chance to listen to this experience, and I apologize if I do not use the right technical words. Then we also have the examples related to Amazonia forest. So that is the chance for us to know a new experience concerning a new database concerning the river basin. Having said so, since we are late, I will be short. I want to thank the previous speakers because they sketched an important scenario. I want to mention one point. In 2024, a very important insurance company made an estimation of damages caused by the climate changes, and the amount was equal to 320 billions of damages. So after that, all the insurance companies are very careful in providing insurance policies to citizens, people living in areas that are not safe from the hydrogeological point of view. In addition to that, the Italian bank institutions say the same. Be careful in allocating loans, money to areas that are not that safe. So One Water wanted to deal with this issue not only as one country, but also and foremost as a coordinator. OECD tells us that some areas more than others are hit and will be hit more than others by climate changes. And these areas are in the southern part of America, the southern part of Mediterranean, so in the southern part of the world. So what could we do facing such a challenge? So we have already started to work about it. In Europe, we established an association of countries overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, that is to say Portugal, Spain, France, and Italy. They joined this association in order to work on agriculture as well, because agriculture is not only related to food, but it is important for policies, for environment, and so on and so forth. So food is a very important item, but to us, it's a matter of development as well. In Tuscany, this is very true, but this development model rooted on global markets and based upon water, well, this model works if there is water. And therefore, the approach to water may vary. We launched many initiatives concerning this aspect. I mentioned just two of that. By 2030, we would like to realize to build 10,000 embankments. We are midway. So what we are talking about, embankment built on the ground, gathering water, as Mr. Gianni said. Sometimes we have streams, rivers that are dry during the year. Then, after extraordinary rainfalls, these streams, these rivers can cause serious damages. That is why we decided to build up these infrastructures that play a key role for environmental reasons as well, because they have an impact on water tables. Sometimes they are on different levels, and therefore these infrastructures can produce energy, which is very important to fight against fires. So there are several functions. In addition to that, we have to work upon innovation. Innovation is very important indeed. But we are working on that too through the design of sensors. We want to install sensors along our canals, and we have many systems equipped with sensors in order to forecast overflows, dry periods, and so on and so forth. Moreover, we also apply AI. In Italy, here in Tuscany, we have a specific consortium for that. Then, many years ago, we started, after Expo 2015, we started a project that allowed us to save a lot of money. So these three solutions together, thanks to the PNRR, and thanks to the forum organized in 2026, we will save 1.5 billion of cubic meter of water. So this is an outstanding result, and we are totally available to work with other partners. So I will start with Mr. Gordillo. He's going to tell us about his experience in Amazonia. Thank you. Thank you very much to you all. I will speak Spanish. The problem related to water crisis is a problem at world level. It's a worldwide level problem. I do believe that these issues is caused by a lack of social justice. In the case of our area in the southern part of Latin America, the deforestation with a loss of 18% of the coverage, according to studies, if we overcome 20%, there is no way out. So, in other words, it is very important to find mechanisms allowing us to change the situation and to invest in any sectors in order to manage dryness and climate changes. In our specific case, during the latest 3 decades, we invented mechanisms in order to achieve these goals. We invented mechanisms named Fondos de Aguas, water funds, whose target is to push public and private sectors to invest, to finance, using both public and private funds. Here you have some slides. We can go to the next slide. So these funds are both public and private ones. And according to a specific mechanism, it is possible to invest in the area that need it most. So as I said, here in the slide, you can see that we are trying to invest in these areas where needs are more severe. There are some mechanisms named Fondos de Agua. There are other investments, cooperation, strategical alliances with more than 20 funds established in several countries. There is also the so-called Red Luck, which is a network of environmental funds with a wider visions trying to obtain public funds through the environmental management. These are small interventions for rural population. In that case, we have a specific mechanisms. I don't think there is a one-fit-all solution. The need is to have safe investments for these sectors. This is what we need. Establishing a fund implies the participation both from the public side and from the private side on a permanent basis in order to support sustainability. Public sector has the right tools. Obtaining resources means having a reliable administration. In Latin America, this system is evolving, is developing. Many of these funds, many of these financial tools go through a bank whose task is to provide sustainable and permanent resources. Many of the funds we use in Latin America have already received these investments. So the amount of money is allocated wherever it is needed. And this is a way to support and to strengthen the rural sector. There are two sectors and two players, the users and the owners. At the beginning, I mentioned social justice. In our area, the problem is that in the rural area, you live with less than €2 a day. This is not justice, and because of that, we have the expansion of the rural frontier in an illegal way with the illegal use of resources. That is why it is important to use these resources, both private and public, through strategies whose target is to reinforce cooperation. There are many, many strategies. Some of them are evolving. We achieved many results. There are also other programs and initiatives launched by public entities, but the problem is on a political level. If there is no political will, all these strategies goes through different administrations without achieving results. So we have to provide water funds, and we have to commit people to have 80-year plans. So we also have to support the exchange of information, know-how, in order to better manage water. Thank you very much for your quick intervention. Now we give to the floor to Mr. Yeya. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced your name. I really like your country. I think that your country, together with Turkey and Arabic countries, have worked really, really hard. So please, can you tell us something about your project? Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for this invitation and giving me the opportunity to present the efforts of the government of Egypt on the regional and continental level. I wouldn't take too much time, but I will briefly describe what's going on since the COP27 and what we're doing and how the cross-border cooperation is very important on the matters of water and climate. Briefly, this is the timeline of what we call it the AWARE initiative. We started at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, where at that time we thought that it's not enough to have just a declaration on water or just a policy paper, but rather we would love to see some tangible to be delivered for the African countries and the Middle East developing countries. Tangibles here, when I mean some real impacts on the ground, and since Egypt also is committed as one of the countries toward its brothers and sisters in Africa, it also put commitments to deliver something on the ground for the African community. Following the COP27, we developed the concept note of the AWARE, and we went to the UN 2023 conference, where Egypt also co-chaired the interactive dialogue on water and climate, and then submitted its commitment on capacity development towards the water action agenda. We have many ministerial meetings with the countries of the AWARE that are now 50 countries that are part of this. And we start to define what are the main priorities and what are the main themes that would cover the interlinkages between the water and climate. In the start of January 2024, we started to build a coordination hub so that it attracts the different UN partners, the different knowledge partners from the regional and continental aspects, and throughout this journey, like the main challenges that the countries have demonstrated the real technical, the lack of technical capacities. In addition to this, they cannot attract the financing opportunity. They don't know how to absorb or grasp the climate financing. We have mainstreams for the AWARE. We have clustered our work into 6 different themes that would cover all the interlinkages that I have mentioned. And I'm gonna focus today on the work stream number 5, which is very relevant to our event today, which is the disaster risk reduction. The first track that we worked on is to have intensive capacity development program for all African countries. We started with a survey and field visit to representative African countries from the different regions to start to work on what are their needs. And we found too many challenges. They identified that they are facing a human resource shortage itself, and sometimes people are working in a domain that they are not specialized in, which is the skill mismatch. And they face also some brain drain, which are the skillful people are up to leave the ministries and the agencies that they are working on. After that, we have developed the most requested training programs over a 4-year plan according to the needs requested by the African. And so far, since the June 2023, with all our partners, CM Barry was one of our partners as well through a joint project. We've implemented 40 physical trainings, and approximately we've reached 850 trainees from 51 African countries. That would present our coverage so far is 98%. And what we're looking for in the future is to have more and more partnerships with the country of the North Mediterranean. That's very important. We're considering Egypt as the gateway for Africa and the Middle East. So basically, we can enhance together the triangular cooperation, and that's why we're part of this event, and we're trying to enhance more and more partnerships with the One Water project and the One Water Committee. Second track that we are targeting through that AWARE platform is further to the capacity development is how to help countries accessing the opportunities of financing. And based on this, we start to identify our countries in clusters who are in the Arab group, who is in the LDCs, who is in the SIDS. So this helped us to map the donors community for them, to monitor the recent trend of the donors and the donor appetite, how to finance this country or a group of country. And maybe that was our entry point, so that instead of going bilaterally with the country, so we group them according to the regional perspective, and then we group them according to a common challenge and need, and then we go together to the financiers or the climate finance agency, and then we have a climate-proven data, a climate-proven impact, and then we follow the pathway in a group. That was very important. Going to our topic today that we're handling, the disaster risk reduction. Everybody knows that the water sector is underfinanced, and the water sector constitutes the majority of the extreme events or the natural water disasters. That, just to refresh our mind, that's we're talking about water, that's the disaster risk reduction. Some examples from the floods and droughts and the affection on people. We're talking about mortality, high mortality rate, and we're talking about the drought that is affecting 1.4 billion people worldwide. Examples from the floods in Kenya, in Brazil, the airport was hit last year, and even Dubai. We're talking about Dubai and the UAE, which is developed countries. Also, developed countries are not far away from the impact of climate change. No country is far from the impacts of climate change. So we're talking about increasing the resilience, whether you are developed or developing or least developed. So we should all work on increasing the resilience. One very important insight, I don't want to take too much time, but I was just giving you some snapshots from the presentation. Just a snapshot on Africa here. We're talking about the mortality rate just from the drought. It's 95% of the death that's coming from the drought, whereas the 60% of the national of the disaster they are faced coming from the flood. So that's why we focused on our work stream 5 on the early warning system for all. The major problem that we are facing, that the fragmentation between the meteorologist and the hydrologist. That's one of the main challenge that we were facing during our consultation with the countries. They are mostly working in isolated islands, whereas to face the challenge of disasters and to increase the resilience in combating the water-related hazards, first important thing is to have a close coordination between meteorologists and hydrologists. That's why we were keen to have direct contact with 40 countries, and then we start to bring all stakeholders in the table, and then we show the opportunity with them and mapping their donors' appetite, and then we see how we could match make their priorities with the donors' also recent trend. What we're facing during this moment, that's what we call a troubling trend. That's the limited fiscal space, and this is also a challenging for the government of Egypt now. It cannot work alone, and the government of Italy now, it needs to expand. I thank the esteemed panelists that paved the way in the first session in the morning. We're talking about how to expand from Europe to African countries and how to enhance the collaboration from the north and south. And that's how we need to combat all these challenges. The limited fiscal space that we're facing worldwide, and we don't want to reach a point on the multilateral stream that everybody's working in isolated island from the north and the south. Meanwhile, we're talking about that Africa have an escalating need, and at the same time, the cost of inaction now would be further exacerbated if we don't act and we don't collaborate through the North Triangular Cooperation and North to South-South Cooperation. I just tried to make it brief as much as possible, and thank you so much for giving me that time. Thank you.
Allora, da parte ringrazio, ve l'avevo detto, insomma c'era un motivo di grande stima, di grande...
Thank you very much. As I told you, the intervention from Egypt was exceptional. Egypt is working in an exceptional way for the management of water resources. So I'm really glad you could listen to his intervention. I would like now to give the floor to Gaia, and then President Spenna and Vice Chairman Terlizzi can join the panel so that we will take a picture. Thank you. Once again, here I am. I will now deal with technical aspects. I only have 5 minutes because there are many other people who will contribute to today's session. Then in our offices we'll have this afternoon a more technical approach. I will now just provide you with the basic information. The District Basin Authority invested a lot on knowledge and competence. And to do what? Well, to do that. What's that? This is a geocatalogue. It's what we define our informed ecosystem, a system to extract information. And it's a working tool. A working tool that is also the result of a 2.5-year period of time in which we worked a lot. We worked a lot to collect all the information of the authority. We looked for all the documents we had in our archives, because, of course, we are very good at managing emergency situations, but we also have much knowledge about prevention. This idea of prevention that was taken by the Basin Authority, that is based on a series of skills and knowledge stockpiled in 1983, can work only if we update our competence, because the map of our risks, of the risks of our territory, is changing, and it changes very often. So we need the capacity to integrate information and to layer them so that the players of the authority can take the best possible choice that is not the only and best option, but is the one that takes into account all the notions we have. Because the system can work on data, on sure and reliable data, on what we call once-only data, because we only process information once. So this instrument is based on specific codes and on directives of the European Union, and I can say that we comply with territory data based on European directives. So from the representation of data, we pass to the use of data. So what matters is not the source of data, but the most important thing for us is for data to be updated. So irrespective of the source, if we can ensure trackability, we enter data in the system and we process them. There are some layers of integration that give us the possibility to work on any kind of theme based on the knowledge we have. Of course, we mainly use technical data, which become our operational basis to carry out our mapping procedures, to assess environmental authorizations and permits, for example. So that's the geocatalog. As you can see to the right, we have a flood management plan, a water management plan, a hydrogeological planning plan. So there are several kinds of plans. So there is no fragmentation of plans, and not even a fragmentation of sources, because thanks to the geocatalog, we can work on more than 650 formats. Why did we choose this structure? Because technical knowledge to be used needs to be certain. We must not start any time from step zero. We can use what we have, for example, in terms of modeling, of data modeling. That's why I wanted to show you some snapshots of how this tool works. These are some images that were extracted by the tool. As you can see, when it lights up, these are maps based on the level of danger. And we can get information, for example, risk mapping, based on the historical point of view. Then we can add more recent events on the mapping. So besides mapping the system, we can also add more recent events. And that's another layer we can add. Look at the picture. We have the potentially significant risk areas. So there are flood information that we collected and uploaded, and then the geocatalog can create layers of information, and we obtain data about the flood risk prevention and hydraulic data, because thanks to ISPRA, we have constant data about floods that allow us to have very specific and precise data to base our action on. This is very important for us to develop our knowledge. As we said, today we're not only looking at the past, we want to look at the future. And we must use artificial and even more human intelligence to do so. Marco, Chairman, please come here so that we can take a picture. Come here, of course.
Bene, allora ripartiamo con
Now we can open up this session devoted to the so-called sponge city solutions. So I invite Gaia, Lorenza Perra, Serena Franceschini, Alessandro Mazzei, Nicola Perini. He's in commission, so he's not here. Paolo Mazzetti, Mauro Grassi is connected online. No, he's not. Anyway. So this session is very interesting because it deals with one of the solutions, more or less structured, to fight against floods, in particular in our urban areas. So there is no need to introduce the speakers because unfortunately we are late, but nevertheless this morning has been rich of many interesting hints. So I give straight the word to Paolo Masetti, President of the Consortium Bonifica 3 Medio Valdarno and of ANBI Tuscany. So there should be a laser to go through the slides. Someone went away, bringing the laser with him or her. Anyway, while we are waiting for the laser, in order to manage my presentation, first of all, I would like to thank for the invitation on behalf of all the consortium of reclamation. We have Mr. Filippi here. I thank you for the invitation to this important meeting in an important day, because we shouldn't simply commemorate what happened in November the 4th in 1966, and that was a very useful day as well, because after that organized voluntary associations were established for the first time. But this is a time for us to gather what we have done facing climate changes. I am very optimistic by nature, so I have many slides, but unfortunately we are late, and I'm just waiting. So I apologize. I will try to skip some slides. This is not my first slide, but it can be useful to understand the area where our consortium works. We are an economic and technical entity. There is a little bit confusion with my slides. So first, this is my next. We are talking about a river, which is an integral part of the life of this city, for good and for bad. So here you have marble transported through the river. Then you have timber used for our cathedral. So the river, over the centuries, has been useful, but unfortunately, it also caused tragedies and disasters, as it was the case in 1966. Here you have the key players working in Tuscany, as Mrs. Kekuchi said. We have the consortium, and we have 6 consortia since 2014 as a result of a law approved in 2012. This law reviewed the mapping of this consortium. So all the 6 work on this area. That is not the full hydrographic network, but it is 36,000 kilometers long. That is slightly less than the planet circumference. So it's an important area. And this network is constantly managed and updated by the region. This is for consortia, the working area. So as for maintenance of rivers in Tuscany, this work is carried out thanks to a reclamation plan. We have to go on. Unfortunately, it is not possible to follow the order of my slides. Anyway, it is a way for us to define the needs of territory with municipalities, trade associations, agriculture association, farmers, and so on and so forth. So this is a teamwork, and this is very important indeed. The Reclamation Consortium by law deal mainly with not structured, not organized maintenance. So we deal with the ordinary maintenance, which is very important indeed, and also with the monitoring and surveillance of all the network. There are two key aspects for us. Dryness on one side and floods on the other side. Mr. Gargano mentioned the plan for embankments to store water that is necessary to farmers. Therefore, we also need retention facilities and balancing facilities to avoid floods. So we work in order to protect the soils and also to support agricultural rural activities. Prevention, which is not structural, the ordinary one is less effective if feedback time are longer and longer. The organized maintenance reaches its peak on specific events. That means that these two aspects of prevention are complementary. The one cannot be without the other ones because both they have an impact for medium and minor events. It is important to remember that nationally there is a law acknowledging a consortium as an active player for prevention. Then we have on October the 23rd the approval by CNEL to increase, to strengthen the role played by our consortium for the prevention action. So consortia are more and more the players in this field. So it is possible for regions to sign agreement with our consortium in order to put in place prevention actions thanks to the skills we have. There are several activities we carry out concerning water, and there is a special attention paid to environmental aspects as well, and that is also important. Over the time, they evolved in a meaningful way. At the beginning, we worked in that way, as you can see. Now we put in place technological solutions. So thanks to experimentation, we evolved a lot. Thanks to the actions taken by consortia, which do not focus only on prevention, but they have to find a way to better manage such a resource using the best technologies, drones included, or communities are also very important. This is a pathway we started all together. Our 6 consortia in Tuscany have started a teaching pathway for kids, for children, in order to let understand the way rivers work, the way consortia work, in order to work for a better future for them as well. We had to face several problems. The consortium of Medio Valdarno faced an important challenge in 2023. Its priority was consisted in 53 interventions. We received just a part of the money being allocated for these interventions, and we also had to work in order to manage 46 extreme emergency cases for a total amount of more than 22 million euros. And recently, we had additional funds for additional risks. All these events modified remarkably the perception by citizens of water-related risks, and therefore consortia pay attention to these aspects, but also to environmental sustainability. It is more difficult to evaluate and to enhance such a sustainability when the risk has an impact on that. The average cost for our emergencies is equal to 2.83 billion euros a year. In conclusion, I would like to quote Zamberletti after 1980, after the headquarters in Irpinia. Act quickly, act earlier. That sentence was taken into account by Warlow as well, and that sentence was repeated by Zamberletti, meaning that it was necessary to carry out a preventive planning. In our context, we can say that we have to act quickly, and we invested a lot in that sense. We are very good in doing so, but we still have to invest in order to act even earlier than that. So we have to invest despite the international scenario that nowadays is not that reassuring. So we have to work in a synergic way. We have to develop the storing capacity. Mr. Gargano mentioned the embankment, so it's important to restore the old ones and to build up new ones. Then we have to think about irrigation, because our economy needs water. We have to use water in an effective way, avoiding wastes. And we have a constant public investment, because otherwise it is not possible for us to face the challenges for the future decades. So I think that consortia should be more and more strategical players to fight against climate change and to adapt to it. Within this context, I invite consortia to work with institutions, with municipalities, with trade associations, with entrepreneurs, with farmers, and so on and so forth. I thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie Paolo.
Thank you, Paolo. Serena Franceschini of the District Basin Authority for Northern Apennines. Can you control your slides from there? Okay, perfect. I'll quickly try and provide you with the most important elements of the solutions nature-based solutions, NBS, and on sponge series in terms of district planning.
Allora, intanto che cosa sono le soluzioni basate sulla natura?
First of all, what are NBS, nature-based solutions, NBSs? I'll base my presentation on what the European Commission stated in 2015. Those are solutions inspired or supported by nature that are economically effective and provide environmental benefit, social and economic advantages, or contribute to make territories more resilient. So these are transversal actions having several goals. For example, urban, peri-urban, and rural sustainable development, restoring degraded ecosystems, adaptation and mitigation to climate change, and so NBSs are win-win measures that are perfect for all the plans of the district authority. As the general manager explained before, the water management plan and the flood management plan. As for the flood management plan, since we are here speaking about floods, the district authority has two different danger maps. The first one is of the classical flood risk. So we have the different danger and risk classes for classical floods like the 1966 one. It's based on hydrological modeling, and it's a point of reference for our district. The other one is more associated to climate change. So it classifies territories in our district that are more subject to flash flood, which are more and more frequent phenomena in our region, and that we must take into account when planning and implementing interventions. Besides the flash flood map that has now been published for years for the Arno River Basin, the first one was in 2015, we also refer to other elements that are very important to assess the potentially negative impact of climate change. For example, soil consumption, thanks to the ISPRA data, and also the buried parts of rivers. The district authority used those data to create flood risk maps that were shown by my general manager in the previous presentation. As for the consumption of soil, ISPRA indicates that the consumption of soil has been increasing for years now. The national average is 7%, and our district is in line with the national average. But of course, in urban areas, the consumption of soil is higher. Another aspect linked to the consumption of soil is that it is higher and higher where the flood risk increases. So as you can see here in the diagram, the consumption of soil in the most dangerous area for floods is clearly higher. What are sponge cities? Sponge cities allow sustainable urban planning because they are equipped with rainwater absorption system. So the risk of flood decreases in the urban areas, and it also decreases the flow towards the sewer system, because we know that the sewer system is at the core of the issues we had in the last decade. And so they are a key component of our planning. And we should, of course, change our planning on the basis of what is happening. And sponge cities are an excellent way to improve the quality of our planning because they can store rainwater and absorb it. So they improve the management of the ecosystem. Sponge cities, as I said before, can store rainwater in order to improve, to naturalize urbanized area. This is a very important measure because, as you can see, we have the different hydrological responses on 3 different levels of urbanization. And as we can see, if urbanization increases, the flowing volume increases too. So this flow is actually negative because it makes us lose important resources, important water resources that would be so important during drought periods, for example. In the flood risk management plan, we have risk protection measures, for example, SUDS, sustainable urban drainage systems, but also renaturation and reforestation areas in the urban space. So sponge cities are, within urban planning, an important measure that must be integrated in a wider perspective. This kind of actions can be useful if we have a unitary vision on the district and on the basin. So an integrated approach in terms of quantity, quality, biodiversity, and use. And of course, there are different scales of intervention in this kind of actions. We spoke this morning of how we worked in the upper part of river, but of course there are also other measures that can be taken at a different scale to manage the risk. The very last 2 elements I'd like to deal with are the national measures that were approved, the European measures for nature restore, and the ministerial decree of January 2nd, 2025 for the consumption of soil and for the upscaling of degraded soil. So we are working to decrease the consumption of soil and in favor of renaturalization of territory. Thank you very much.
Grazie, grazie Serena. Intanto invito a salire Massimiliano Panero.
I invite Mr. Panero, Vice President of Sogecit. I invite him here to the podium. Alessandro Mazzei, General Manager of AIT and Technical Coordinator of ANEA. Good morning to you all. I would like to give a short contribution to this outstanding debate. And I would like to talk about a very important topic, considering the current experiences. I would like to talk about the relationship between the integrated services we provide, that is to say, water mains, drainage, and so on and so forth, and the way cities manage rainfalls. Urban drainage is a very important and delicate topic. As the previous speakers said, there are often flash flooding hitting our cities. So on one hand, we have climate changes and therefore stronger and stronger pressures and more severe events. And on the other hand, we have the higher and higher waterproofing level of our cities and towns. This balance is more and more precarious and unstable. Therefore, I think that this should be our priority for the future decades. We should mitigate more and more the flood-related risks. Talking about the relationship between the integrated water services and urban drainage, we can say that the latter implies several skills, as the presence of many people here at the podium shows. It's a matter of resources, no doubt. Works on urban drainage are not that known. Often we think, more or less correctly, that the water drainage system should include rain waters as well, but this is not often the case. Sometimes some systems are devoted to rainfalls, but these are not that known and therefore they are poorly maintained. So we have to better know the existing systems. We also have to identify the financial resources in order to manage these systems, which are very important. In our cities, they should contain rainfalls, but because of the extreme events we face, these activities are carried out with many difficulties. In addition to that, there are also many players involved which are skilled, but there is also a point related to tools. In these sectors, we have many players, and often they are not coordinated in their actions, and often the tools they use are not coordinated either. According to our data, we know that in our cities, approximately 66% of drainage systems are used for rainfalls as well. They are the so-called mixed networks. So 2/3 of the existing facilities in Tuscany are represented by systems carrying out both activities, that is to say, the drainage of civilian waters, waste waters, and so on and so forth, and also they are used for rain walls. So often they have not the right dimensions to carry out this double activity. Moreover, as I said, we also have a specific system devoted to rainfall, 1/3. And these systems are not very well known. I mean, we do not know them that much. We do not know where they are. And most of the time, more often than not, the maintenance is really poor for these systems. So, from this perspective, I think that we should simplify things. We should streamline procedures. I believe that in our cities, time has come to associate the management both of mixed systems and the systems for rainfalls. I believe that the integrated services providers should manage both aspects. So it should be responsible to manage rainfalls in urban areas, and therefore it should be the one managing the whole set of systems, the ones for civilian water, wastewater, and also the ones concerning rainfall. So that would be a way to simplify tasks, interventions, responsibilities, and also that would be a way for us to tackle in a more integrated and aware way the issue related to planning. Because if you know these systems, if you manage the systems, then you have to carry out both the ordinary and extraordinary maintenance for these systems, which should be strengthened. Just an example of what we started in Tuscany after the events in November 2023 and March 2025. At that time, we understood that if we want to mitigate floods, which are more and more often and recurrent in our cities, we have to have a responsible for that. For example, here you have a case, the municipality of Montemurlo, where on a regular basis, anytime it rains a little bit more than usual, we have severe floods. So here, as institution, and I thank Publiacqua for its support, we decided to study the whole drainage system in details. This is a pilot project, and we would like to duplicate it all over the area. So we have to study all the interferences between the drainage system, the water system, the retention basins, the infrastructures existing in the area that should reduce the risks of floods. Because first of all, we have to understand why floods happens and what we can do in order to avoid these floods to be recurrent. Then we have to focus on planning. We have to plan our interventions. In this municipality, we identified 14 important interventions for a total amount of 17,000 euros in order to avoid flash floods and in order to support the system in these extreme events. Then we have to avoid all the points where there is a negative interference. 17 million euros for a small municipality in the province of Prato. There are severe problems, that's true, but this is a first step forward. If we multiply this amount for all the areas where Public Aqua works, well, that implies several interventions. So we have to take into account all the different systems, which often are managed by different authorities. That's why sometimes you never know who is in charge of planning or managing and so on and so forth. So in my view, this is what we should do first. First of all, we have to integrate. We have to support integration among players, actions, and I think that we have to play our role. There are huge problems. First of all, we have to understand how to fix prices for these works, because the price fixing is based upon other principles, other criteria, but it is something we cannot avoid to do, given the severe events we experienced recently. So all the players, all the stakeholders have to start to work in a very integrated way. Everyone has to be responsible. Thank you very much.
Grazie, grazie.
Thank you. Thank you, Alessandro. Lorenzo Pera, I hope you'll keep providing us with the interesting insight of the president, chairman of Pluris. Good morning, everyone. I'll try to go straight to the most important aspects of my presentation. What's Pluris? It's a small multi-utility society that unites the urban areas of central Tuscany. We have 65 municipalities. We are present in Florence, in Prato, in Pistoia, with different services, the services that were provided by Public Aqua, the water utility, but also for energy and for waste action with Alia. 2 years ago, we decided to create a single utility company for all those services. And this is a place, a very important place, as President Gianni said, but this is also a place where we can see how many wars were fought in Tuscany between different municipalities. Painter Vasari has perfectly represented that in this venue. What happened over those 2 years? Well, we experienced the passage from great floods to sudden floods, and there is a difference with respect to greater floods, because sudden floods happen every year, almost every year. 2023, 2025, we had flash floods, and the first one was really serious, as we know. I'll quote Alessandro Mazzei. In our context, there are still several competencies, several skills, which means that sometimes we are not effective in our actions. Also with respect to climate change. Just think of the municipality of Florence. We have 6 players with 3 contracts for management authorities that only deal with water flow and some parts of water flow. So, of course, integrating services are very important. And we should reunite competence in single operators. But I must remember that for this year and for next year, we'll have 3 contracts with 2 management authorities and 6 players that will manage the infrastructure. And it's impossible to ignore that. So we need a decision, a definitive decision, also to have a new approach also in terms of sewage and sewer system. Since we reunite several players and service providers, we also wanted to carry out some general assessments of the costs that were necessary and the costs associated to flash floods, comparing it to the necessary investments that would be necessary at the local level. The group invests 400 to 500 million euro per year. That's the plan for the next years. And what we experienced as territory and system and country is that in 2023 we spent 2.7 billion euro and 1 billion was spent in 2025. So 1 billion euro spent to face the consequences of these events. And we asked Erasmo De Angeli to make an estimate of the necessary investments for the areas. And it's roughly more than 1 billion, a bit more than 1 billion. It's okay for the investment capacity of the group, and it's far less than what this kind of events cost. So the expense is lower. So once again, the invitation I make for you, for Alessandro Mazzei, and for the decision makers is to take the information of this event, being aware that even local actors can invest.
Grazie Lorenzo. Ultimo intervento, Massimiliano Panera, vicepresidente, Panero, scusami, perdonami, vicepresidente di Sogge.
The last speaker, Mr. Panero. Good morning to you all. So, drawing the conclusions of such a technical meeting is not that easy. So now I would like to share with you a contribution which is not a technical one, but I would like to start from a symbol date for me as it is today for Florence. My date is November the 4th, 1984. November the 4th, 1984. I started from this date because I would like you to focus on an important aspect to me. That is to say, the perception of safety. As for risks related to floods and dryness, the perception of safety for citizens. We have never to forget the relationship between nature and man and the relationship between man and man. At that time, I was a very young journalist, and I was writing a planning for a company based in Cuneo. It was late afternoon, it was dark, it was raining very, very heavily. I started to drive to the Musotto area outside Alba, and there was my way to home. So that road is close to the Tanaro River. It was a matter of few seconds, believe me, few seconds, total darkness, pouring rain, close to the road, overflowing on the state road, and it was really, really scaring. It was as if we were in the middle of a lake or a big pond. At first, it could be funny, but then you realize that water was increasing its level. So first of all, I thought, what I'm going to do if the rain doesn't stop? What I'm going to do if rain enters my car because I can't see where the road is? Where can I go if I can't see the road? Few seconds, I continued driving, and thank goodness there was a slight hill, and so few meters ahead, and I was safe. In that specific point, 1 hour later, 3 people lost their lives in that specific point. So that was a very marking day for me. At that time, I thought many, many things. What if? What if I stopped at a red light? Was if I was late and I stayed at work a little bit longer? What if? So I had a perception of the littleness of man facing nature. Nature is never bad, killing. Often newspapers titles state nature is a killer, but this is not true. That was a tragedy for the area, for Alba. Totally, we had 60 casualties. That was a warm night, and the limit between rain and snow was between 2,000 and 2,900. So more than 35 millimeter rain per hour fell. So at that time, for us, it was the event of a lifetime. As a matter of fact, that was important for those who were there, but the same happened 25 years earlier at Biella. 6 years later, in 2000, the same event occurred in Turin, 24 casualties. At that time, the Po River level is equal to 50 centimeters, as it is today. That night, in 2000, it was equal to 5 meters and 50 centimeters, which is a lot, and it's even more if you take into account that usually the river level is equal to 50 centimeters. So from the beginning of the 17th century to the 90s, we had one event a month in Turin area. Now we have one flood every 17 months between the year 2000 to 2025. So something changed. But at that time, we noticed the importance of the relationship man to man. It was a time of extraordinary humanity. A few days later, I started my military service. I was one of the Alpines in Cuneo. And my training was really short, just 3-4 days, I can't remember. We went to Fossano, and we drove Fossano Alba every day for about 3 weeks. We went to Alba to free the area from mud together with workers. And the mothers of Alba helped us and supported us. They prepared for us teas, cakes. So the examples of mud angels remind me that episode. It was a tragedy, a very touching human experience. You can't forget it if you experienced so. But I learned that in difficult times, men are able to be a community. Sometimes we tend to forget. And I believe that this is one of the key aspects of what we are doing right now. We cannot oppose ourselves to nature. We cannot contrast nature. We can simply try to guide it. But regardless of the extreme events, we have to identify a common, transparent, and shared pathway. We also have to think about regulations, technologies, infrastructures. We have to carry out actions of international governance. As we saw from the slide, water doesn't care about geographical or administrative boundaries. It doesn't care. It flows totally free and independent. Therefore, we have to act in terms of sentiment. We have to take into account the perception by citizens. Mr. Acquaroli, president of the market region, talking about the intervention of retention and balancing basins in Senegalia. Well, Mr. Acquaroli said and emphasized that these works must convey a feeling of peaceful and safety. I like living here because I feel serene and safe. This is what we have to convey. That's why we have to carry out a communication that must be efficient, transparent, and inclusive. I really appreciated the intervention by Medio Valdarno Consortia, and also I appreciated the intervention by Mr. Cordilio, because they talked about the importance of involving people. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize the reuse. To us, to Sogesit, this is very important indeed. Communication is even more important talking about reuse. OXE reminded us that Italy is prone to a medium-high stress. At the same time, Confindustria reminds us that wastewaters are used only for 4%, even if the reuse could achieve 23% without taking into account the reuse of rainfalls. So somehow we should reuse this water. We know that we should go that way, but first of all, we have to convey and guarantee safety and also at hygienic level. We have to work on pollutants, on agents, weather agents, and we have to share everything with people, with the citizens. If one day a mother questions a possible antibiotics could harm her child because of the weather-related events, that would be a disaster for our governance, for our politics, and so on and so forth. According to a study, wastewater have been analyzed for 80 centers, and one of the results was the presence of ketamines, cannabis, and so on and so forth. So in conclusion, I want to emphasize that we have to convey a feeling of safety. That could be a priority for water as well. We have to establish a new relationship with the citizen based upon trust, care, because the citizens must have the feeling to be close to the others, members of a community, and the mud angels are just an example of that. The workers of Ferrero, the company we saved in 1984, and Mud Angels showed us that in difficult time we are able to be united. Thank you. So we are close to the conclusions.
Many of the people who spoke today are really fond of Florence. Right at this time, a river flowed at 70 kilometers per hour 59 years ago, and it would take everything with it until Pisa. Florence was invaded by the river, and that terrible event involved more than 100 municipalities in Italy. Half Italy was underwater, like Venice and many cities in the north. I think Giulio De Marchi is the right person to close today's meeting, and he was the chairman of the Interministerial Commission for Water Management after 1966. He is the father of Law 183 for the defense of soil, and he once told me, rivers can overflow whenever we want. We can make them overflow wherever we want. I think this is the best conclusion for today, because of course this is what we have to work on. And Italy, in the upcoming Euro-Mediterranean Forum next year in Rome, will bring this knowledge and the capability of intervening through the different defense mechanisms of our urban areas. We have a very important opportunity thanks to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and different Italian ministries. Italy has become the very core of water management issues, and that's an excellent strength for us. I would like to thank Gaia Kikuchi and to thank everyone who worked to organize such an interesting event. And this afternoon, the meeting will continue at the premises of the Basin Authority. We'll deal with water technologies. So thank you, everyone, and see you for the next event, in which we'll try to go even deeper in this subject. Thank you.
To place water at the center of the international agenda. Water considered not only as an economic resource, but rediscovered in all its many values. And Italy is the country of water. From north to south, over the centuries, it has been the main resource within industrial, governmental and financial ecosystems. Many Italian cities live and evolve in close contact with water, and among them, Rome is an ideal choice to host the Euro-Mediterranean Water Forum in 2026. A historic yet modern city with 1,280 square kilometers of total municipal area, numerous green spaces, and a proven aptitude for hosting major events. A city where water is not only a physical element, but also a cultural and artistic factor that enriches the experience of those who visit. The goal is to become the laboratory for updating the integrated management of water resources for the 21st century. And Rome is ready for this commitment, together with the involvement of institutions, local and national authorities, businesses, and individuals, but above all, the people.